My friends, as we look across the world of spiritual seeking today, we find a curious trend. Everywhere you turn, people are searching for some new method to awaken the soul. They speak of activating the pineal gland, of awakening a hidden center behind the eyes, of unlocking mystical energies stored in the body. And because these ideas appear to offer something tangible, something you can measure or manipulate, the human mind becomes fascinated with them. It imagines that if only it can adjust a certain physical organ, if it can release a particular chemical, then spiritual illumination will surely follow. But the mystical life does not begin in the body, nor is it dependent upon the body for its realization. Spiritual illumination is not brought about by adjusting a gland, nor by stimulating a nerve, nor by awakening a physical center. Spiritual illumination is the recognition of the presence that has always been here, at the center of your own being. It does not come to you from outside your consciousness, and it is not awakened by altering some physical function. It dawns the moment you cease looking outward for causes and begin resting in the awareness that God, as your own consciousness, is already fully present. When Jesus spoke of the single eye, he was not directing attention to the anatomy of the human head. He was revealing a principle of consciousness that has nothing to do with the physical body. He was saying, in the language of the mystic, that when your awareness becomes undivided, when you recognize only one presence, one power, one life, then your whole experience becomes filled with light. But as long as you believe that some physical mechanism must be activated before spiritual awareness is possible, you are still looking to effects rather than to cause. Therefore, let us be very clear at the outset. There is nothing wrong in studying the body or appreciating its wonders. But if you believe that spiritual realization depends upon the condition of a gland, you have missed the entire essence of the spiritual path. For consciousness alone is the key, and consciousness alone reveals the Christ. All true awakening begins within, in the quiet recognition that the infinite is already here, already functioning as your very awareness. And so, before we go further, let us release the idea that anything external can bring us closer to God. Let go of the belief that enlightenment must be activated through some secret mechanism. The presence you seek is already present. The light you hope to awaken is the light that has never left you. All that is required is the willingness to look within, with a single, undivided awareness, and to recognize what has always been true. Now let us turn to the profound statement spoken by the Master. If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. For centuries, the world has read these words with a physical interpretation in mind. Some have imagined that Jesus was referring to the pineal gland, others to a mystical center located somewhere between the eyebrows, and still others to some hidden organ that must be stimulated or awakened. But Jesus did not teach physiology. He spoke always to the inner man, to the consciousness of the listener, and his words were addressed to the invisible center of awareness where God is realized. When the Master spoke of the eye, he was not referring to sight, but to seeing the capacity to behold reality, the ability to discern the truth behind appearances. And when he said that this eye must be single, he meant that your consciousness must rest in the recognition of only one presence and one power. The eye becomes single the moment you cease to entertain two powers, good and evil, spirit and matter, God and something other than God. As long as you acknowledge more than one power, your eye is divided, your consciousness is split, and you are unable to behold the fullness of the light. The single eye is the consciousness that knows, without hesitation or effort, that God is all, It does not struggle to see this truth, for it is not attained by willpower. It is simply recognized. And when that recognition dawns, when the mind no longer wavers between God and something else, your entire experience becomes illumined. Not the physical body alone, but the whole fabric of your life begins to shine with the clarity that comes from unity of vision. To see with the single eye is to behold the one. Where the world sees the many, it is to feel the presence. Where others see absence, it is to rest in the assurance that the infinite is expressing itself here and now, even though the senses may report lack, fear, disease, or conflict. The senses always testify to appearances, but the single eye beholds reality, and reality is always spiritual. Therefore, when we speak of seeing with a single eye, we are not entering the field of occult anatomy. We are living in the realm of pure awareness. We are recognizing God as the substance, the law, the life, and the activity of all being. And when this awareness becomes established in us, even lightly, even tentatively, the body becomes full of light because our whole experience is bathed in a new understanding. The world may not notice a sudden change, but in our consciousness something has shifted. The veil of duality has begun to dissolve. So let us approach this teaching with the humility and openness of the seeker who is willing to lay aside all preconceived notions. Do not try to force the meaning into the language of glands and centers. Hear it as the mystic hears it, as a call to recognize one presence alone. For that recognition is the single eye, and through it the light reveals itself. Let us look honestly for a moment at why the human mind is so drawn to physical explanations of spiritual awakening. It is because the mind, living as it does in a world of appearances, feels comfortable with what it can touch, measure, and analyze. If it can point to a gland, or to a center in the body, or to some mechanism hidden within the brain, then it believes it has discovered something solid, something dependable, something that can be manipulated to produce a desired outcome. The human mind is always seeking control, and physical explanations offer the illusion of control. But spiritual realization is not born of control. It is born of surrender. And surrender is the very thing the human mind fears. It would much rather adjust a gland than relinquish its belief in two powers. It would much rather stimulate the body than release its reliance upon the senses. It would rather adopt a technique, a method, a process, anything that promises transformation without requiring the mind to relinquish its own authority. You see, the human mind is uncomfortable with the simplicity of truth. It is not satisfied with recognizing that God is the only presence. It insists upon a system. It wants a map. It wants steps. It wants something to do, something to fix, something to activate. And so it grasps for the physical. It says, if only I can awaken this center, then illumination will follow. But all the while, illumination is already present. It is not waiting for a physical change. It is waiting for the mind to become still, to become transparent enough for the light to shine through. Joel Goldsmith taught us that the body does not lead consciousness. It is led by consciousness. If the body were capable of producing spiritual awareness, then every healthy person would be enlightened and every mystic would have a perfect physical structure. But we know from experience that this is not so. Some of the profoundest seers have lived in frail bodies, just as some of the healthiest individuals have never glimpsed the spiritual life. Therefore, the cause cannot be found in the body. It must be found in consciousness. And consciousness does not awaken because chemistry shifts. Chemistry shifts because consciousness awakens. The body reflects the state of awareness. It does not produce it. Trying to reach God by adjusting the body is like trying to reach the sun by polishing the window. It is the light behind the window that matters, not the glass itself. The window may be clean or cloudy, clear or stained, but the sun shines regardless. Your task is not to polish endlessly. It is to turn toward the light. So let us understand why the physical explanation is so tempting. It gives the mind something to hold on to, something it can manipulate. But the mystery of God cannot be manipulated. It can only be recognized. It can only be surrendered to. It can only be realized by the quiet awareness that says, here, where I am, God is. And in that recognition, the need for physical mechanisms fades away and the truth of being stands revealed. Now, let us speak gently and clearly about the matter that so many today regard with such fascination, the pineal gland. Across cultures and centuries, this small organ has been surrounded by layers of symbolism. Ancient mystics, philosophers, and poets have pointed to it as a metaphor for inner sight, the seat of the soul, the hidden lamp of awareness, and it is natural for the human mind to become intrigued by such symbols. They appear mysterious, and whatever is mysterious seems spiritual to the intellect. But, my friends, a symbol is never the reality. A metaphor is not the truth itself. And when symbolism is mistaken for substance, the seeker becomes lost in forms instead of resting in the formless presence that transcends all forms. The pineal gland is a part of the physical organism. It fulfills bodily functions. It participates in the rhythms of the human structure, but it does not reveal God, nor does it obstruct God. It neither awakens Christ's consciousness nor prevents it. It is simply another appearance within the grand tapestry of the body. Yet it remains profoundly useful as a symbol, for it directs the attention inward. It reminds the seeker that spiritual sight is not outward vision but inward recognition. It points not to an organ, but to the fact that true seeing does not depend upon the eyes. The mystics spoke of this gland because they needed an image, a picture, a way to indicate that there exists a mode of perception beyond the senses, a seeing that is not done with the eyes, but with the awareness itself. If you hold the pineal gland as a symbol, it can be helpful. It can remind you to turn within, to become still, to look beyond appearances. But if you hold it as a cause, a mechanism, or a doorway to enlightenment, then you have missed the entire meaning. No physical structure can open the way to God. No organ can limit the infinite. No biological process can usher in spiritual realization. The function of the body is to serve the experience of human life, but the function of the soul is to reveal the presence of God, and no part of the body can govern the soul. Joel Goldsmith always cautioned us not to confuse the symbol with the reality. He did not deny the beauty of symbols, nor did he criticize their use, but he gently guided us beyond them. He reminded us that the Christ is an activity of consciousness, not a function of the brain. He invited us to realize that spiritual illumination is the dawning of awareness, not the stimulation of tissue. Therefore, we honor the pineal gland for what it represents, and we release it from the burden of producing spiritual awakening. Let it be a symbol of inner sight, but not the source of it. Let it be a reminder of the invisible reality, but not the path to it. Let it stand as a pointer to the truth that the light you seek does not arise from the body but shines through the body from the eternal presence already within your consciousness. Let us now look directly at what Joel Goldsmith understood the single eye to be. Not as a poetic idea nor as a mystical symbol, but as an actual state of consciousness that transforms one's entire experience of life. For Goldsmith, the single eye was nothing less than the recognition of one presence, a consciousness that sees only God, knows only God, rests only in God, not as a comforting belief, not as a philosophy to repeat, but as a living awareness that there is no power apart from God, no life apart from God, no law apart from God, and no existence outside the infinite that is expressing itself as all. This single eye is the end of duality. It is the end of a universe in which God and something else appear to be competing powers. It is the end of believing that spirit is on one side and matter on the other. It is the end of imagining that good is sometimes present and sometimes absent. When the eye is single, you see that all life is one life, all power is one power, all being is one being. You see that what the senses report is never the truth of God's creation, but only the outward appearance through which the mind interprets its own beliefs. In the light of the single eye, the world begins to take on a new aspect, not because the world is changed, but because your seeing has changed. You begin to look at disease and feel no fear, because you no longer accept a second power operating in opposition to life. You look at lack and feel no anxiety, because you no longer believe there is a force capable of withholding supply from the infinite. You look at conflict and feel no hostility, because you no longer imagine that anything can oppose the nature of love. You look at death itself and feel no separation, because you know that life is infinite and indivisible. This does not mean that the appearances instantly vanish, but their hold upon your consciousness dissolves. Their ability to disturb, frighten, or compel you dissolves. Their sense of reality dissolves, for you are no longer beholding appearances through a divided mind, but through the single awareness that knows only God. This is the meaning of being full of light. It is not that everything suddenly becomes easy or perfect. It is that your consciousness becomes illumined, and in that illumination, that appearances lose their power. To live with the single eye is not to deny the world, nor to turn away from its problems, nor to insist upon some human perfection. It is simply to see through the world, to behold its spiritual reality behind its changing forms. It is to look at every person and recognize the same Christ that is the essence of your own being. It is to meet every condition with the quiet assurance that the presence, which is infinite, is already here. It is to rest in the recognition that nothing needs to be added, removed, fixed, cured, improved, or activated. God is the allness of this moment, and the single eye beholds that allness wherever it looks. And so, when Goldsmith spoke of the single eye, he did not speak of an effort, nor of a discipline, nor of a practice to attain something. He spoke of a shift in awareness, a recognition, a transparency, a surrender of the belief in duality. He spoke of a way of seeing that requires no strain because it is the natural seeing of the soul, when the mind is quiet enough to let truth reveal itself. The single eye is not an organ. It is not asleep or awakened. It is not located in the skull. It is the stillness of consciousness resting in the awareness of one presence. And to the degree that you live in that awareness, even for a moment, your whole being becomes filled with the light of spiritual recognition. Now we come to a point that must be understood if the spiritual path is to unfold naturally and without confusion. Spiritual awakening does not depend upon the condition of the body. It is not determined by the chemistry of the brain, nor by the activity of an organ, nor by the functioning of any physical structure. Awakening is the revelation of what already is. It is not produced by anything that happens in time, space, or matter. The body belongs to the realm of effect, not cause. It reflects the state of consciousness. It does not generate it. And so long as you believe that spiritual realization is dependent upon physical change, you will be attempting to correct effects while ignoring the cause behind them. You will be treating the shadow instead of turning toward the light that casts it. Joel Goldsmith spoke of this often. He reminded us that the body, with all its wonder and complexity, is still only an instrument. It is the form through which consciousness appears, but it is not the source of that consciousness. Just as the radio does not produce the music but simply receives it, the body does not produce life. Spirit, or awareness, it is the means through which the infinite expresses itself in visible form. If we were to base our spiritual development upon the body, we would quickly fall into contradiction. There have been mystics who lived in fragile, sickly bodies but were radiant with divine illumination. There have been others with strong, healthy bodies who never sensed the presence within themselves. There have been men and women who experienced profound realization in the midst of physical discomfort, and others who remained spiritually asleep even when the body was vigorous. Clearly, then, the body cannot be the determining factor. You must understand that spiritual realization is not a sensation. It is not something you feel in the nerves or experience as an altered state. It is a shift in identity from believing yourself to be a separate human self, subject to the rise and fall of physical conditions, to recognizing yourself as the presence that is eternal, infinite, and untouched by the temporary forms appearing in time. The moment you try to anchor enlightenment in the body, you create limitation where none exists. You imagine that God must work through certain channels, certain organs, certain conditions. You imagine that God can be obstructed, but God cannot be obstructed. The infinite requires no physical gateway through which to express itself. The Christ does not wait for a gland to open before revealing its presence. The light does not ask permission to shine. When consciousness awakens, it does so regardless of the body's condition. If the body is tired, awareness remains clear. If the body is ill, awareness remains whole. If the body is at rest, awareness remains active. Awareness itself is never diminished, disturbed, or hindered by the body, and the realization of this is the beginning of freedom. For the moment you understand that the body is not the path to God, you stop struggling with it, you stop attempting to spiritualize matter, you stop looking for signs in the flesh, you stop seeking in the finite what can only be found in the infinite, and as you release the body from the burden of producing spiritual experience, you become available to the quiet recognition that God is already here as your own consciousness, in this very moment, complete and entire. This recognition is the essence of awakening. It is not a process the body undergoes. It is a realization the soul receives. And when that realization dawns, you discover that the body, far from being the obstacle you once imagined, simply becomes a vessel through which the harmony of spirit may radiate. Now that we have spoken of the nature of the single eye, let us consider how this spiritual vision becomes a living, practical experience. For the truth must be embodied. It must be lived. It must be recognized in the midst of daily activity, not as an effort, not as a discipline imposed upon the mind, but as a gentle, continuous turning toward the presence that is always here. The first practice, if we may call it a practice, is what Joel Goldsmith referred to as the practice of the presence. This is not a meditation technique. It is not concentration. It is not the repetition of words. It is simply the quiet, natural pause in which you remember God is here, not somewhere else, not later on, not when you have purified yourself or adjusted your thoughts, but here in this moment as your very awareness for a few seconds, perhaps no more than a breath. You acknowledge the invisible as the reality of this moment, and then you return to whatever you were doing. These moments, repeated throughout the day, gradually dissolve the belief in separation and establish the sense of unity that is the single I. The second practice is the impersonalization of appearances. When a problem arises, whether as sickness, lack, fear, or discord, the human mind immediately interprets it as personal. This is happening to me. This is my condition. This is my failure. But Goldsmith taught us to step back from this reaction. He reminded us that these conditions are not personal. They are universal beliefs appearing in individual experience. They are suggestions of a world that sees two powers. And the moment you refuse to accept them as personal, you loosen their hold upon your consciousness. You do not deny the appearance, but you deny that it has truth in God. You deny that it has authority over your being. You deny that it defines your identity. The third practice is the practice of silent recognition. In times of quiet, you rest in the awareness that I am. Not I am this or I am that. Simply, I am. You do not attempt to change anything. You do not seek to create spiritual experiences. You do not strive for visions or sensations. You rest, and in this resting, the mind becomes transparent, and the light that is always shining becomes perceptible to your consciousness. This is the simplest of all practices, yet it is the doorway to every deeper realization. The fourth practice is the return to oneness, again and again, regardless of the conditions that confront you. If fear arises, do not fight the fear. Recognize that fear is simply a suggestion of a second power. If doubt appears, do not resist the doubt. Recognize that doubt is only the echo of a mind that believes itself separate. If turmoil surrounds you, do not attempt to control the turmoil. Recognize that the presence within you is not touched by outer conditions, and in that recognition, you become still. This stillness is the single I. This stillness is the awareness through which God reveals itself. These practices are not steps to perform, nor techniques to master. They are gentle movements of awareness. They are ways of returning again and again to the truth that there is only one life unfolding itself, and that this life is your own being when practiced with sincerity, not intensity, not force. But sincerity, they gradually dissolve the layers of separation that have obscured the vision of oneness. And so the single I is not attained through effort, but through relaxation, not through searching, but through finding, not through activity, but through resting. It is the natural state of consciousness when the mind no longer clings to the belief in two powers. And as this awareness becomes familiar, you discover that the presence is nearer than your breath, nearer than your thoughts, nearer than your emotions. It is the very essence of your being, As you live more consistently in the awareness of one presence, a quiet and profound transformation begins to unfold within you. It does not come with fanfare, nor does it announce itself with dramatic sensations. It appears gently, almost imperceptibly at first, like dawn rising behind the horizon long before the sun is visible. Yet as you continue to rest in the single eye, the entire landscape of your inner life begins to change. The first change is an increasing sense of peace, a peace that is not dependent upon conditions. It does not arise because circumstances have improved, but because consciousness has become less reactive to circumstance. The mind that once trembled at every disturbance begins to rest in a deeper assurance. It begins to sense that something greater than appearances is governing every detail of life. And this quiet inner confidence is the first evidence that the single eye is opening within you. Next, you notice that fear loses much of its power. Fear may still arise from time to time, but it no longer defines you. You begin to see fear for what it is, a suggestion, not a reality, a passing shadow, not a presence. And because you no longer identify with it, it subsides more quickly. You find yourself standing in the midst of situations that would once have overwhelmed you, and you remain calm, not because you have forced yourself to be calm, but because the consciousness that knows only one presence simply cannot be shaken by the appearance of a second. Then you begin to observe improvements in outward conditions, not because you have tried to change them, but because your consciousness has changed. Health difficulties may ease, not as miracles to celebrate, but as natural consequences of harmony being recognized within you. Supply may flow more freely, not because you have affirmed abundance, but because you are no longer living in the belief that supply comes from outside yourself. Relationships may soften and become more cooperative, not because you have tried to manage others, but because you now meet each person with the awareness of their true identity, rather than with judgment or fear. There is also a deepening sense of clarity, a clarity that does not come from thinking, but from seeing. Problems that once confused you now reveal their unreal nature. Decisions that once seemed difficult now unfold naturally without anxious analysis. The right action becomes apparent without strain, because it arises not from human reasoning, but from the quiet intelligence of the presence expressing itself through you. As this inner transformation continues, you may notice that outer disturbances affect you less and less. The news of the world does not draw you into despair. The behavior of others does not provoke you as it once did. Even your own thoughts lose their authority. You begin to recognize that thoughts are not you, they are only movements within consciousness, and this recognition frees you from the tyranny of mental activity. Eventually you will find that you have become, in a small but unmistakable way, a healing presence, not because you attempt to heal, but because the consciousness that sees only God radiates a quiet influence wherever it is. People may feel calmer in your presence without understanding why. Confusion may dissolve simply because the clarity within you makes confusion impossible. Discord may settle because you are no longer adding resistance to it. This transformation is not something you achieve. It is something that reveals itself naturally. When you stop believing in two powers, it is the inevitable blossoming of the soul that has remembered its source. It is the unfolding of the Christ within you, not as a phenomenon, but as the very essence of your being shining through the forms of daily life. And so the single eye is not merely an idea to contemplate. It is a living state of awareness that reshapes your entire experience from within. It brings light where there was darkness, peace where there was fear, harmony where there was conflict, and wholeness where there was limitation, not because conditions have changed first, but because you have seen through them to the presence that has always been the truth behind every appearance. As we bring our time together to a close, let us gently return to the one truth that has been at the center of every word spoken. There is only one presence, one power, one life, one consciousness, and that one is expressing itself as you. Everything we have explored, whether the symbolism of the pineal gland, the meaning of the single eye, the practice of the presence, or the quiet transformation that unfolds, is simply a way of pointing you back to this eternal fact. There is no gateway you must open. There is no spiritual mechanism you must activate. There is no inner structure you must awaken. The activity of God is already taking place as your own being. Your role is not to make anything happen. Your role is to recognize what is already true. The mind wants procedures, steps, techniques, diagrams, and secrets, but Spirit offers nothing of the kind. Spirit says only this: be still and know that I am God. Not far away, not above, not beyond, but here, as the very awareness that hears these words, and in this recognition you become free. Not free from the world, but free from the belief that the world has power over you. Not free from the body, but free from the belief that the body determines your spiritual state. Not free from appearances, but free from the belief that appearances reveal reality. This is the freedom of the sons and daughters of God, the freedom that comes when the single eye has replaced the divided mind, and you can look upon all things and behold one presence, one life, one source, shining through every form. Do not try to hold on to this truth. Simply rest in it. Let it be. Let it reveal itself. Whenever the mind grows quiet enough to receive it, if in this moment you have glimpsed even a hint of the light that is within you, trust it. If something within you has stirred, allow it. If peace has touched you, even for a breath, let that trace of peace be enough. It will grow of its own accord, without your effort, because the Christ within you is always seeking expression. And so, as you return to the activities of your day, do not leave this awareness behind. Carry it gently, without strain. Remember, even for a second at a time, I and the Father are one. Let this recognition do its own work in you. For the eye of your being is the light of this world, and nothing can add to it, and nothing can take it away.